Hi, everyone. Welcome to our the International SCN8A Alliance's live webinar for International SCN8A Awareness Day 2023. We're really glad to have you with us. Joining us on screen today is some of the International SCN8A Alliance team. I think you all know most of us, but I'm Gaby Conecker, mom to Elliot, who's 10 with SCN8A. And co-founder of the Alliance with Michael Hammer and JayEtta Z. Do you guys want to say hi real quick?
Hi, thanks for joining.
Yeah. And we also have Elise Tanzer, who joined us about how many months ago now? 9 months, was it?
Eight or 9 months ago.
9 months ago, as the clinical research coordinator, really helping with the registry. You guys may have heard from her. And if you're still wanting to do the registry, you didn't get to it, you still can. We always want to hear from you. A registry drive is live and ready to go, and we're pushing, but we always want to hear from folks if you didn't make it during the drive itself. So Elise is your lady if you want to hear about that. So we've got a packed agenda today. We have a lot of special guests who are joining us by video, a few live. And the idea really today is to talk a little bit about kind of what's going on in the world of SCN8A. What is the Alliance working on? Our mission is really to improve the quality of life and care and treatments for people living with SCN8A and their families. And so, everything we do is really putting families at the center. So please use the chat to chime in, share your thoughts, share what's going on for you. If you have questions, we'll bring you on camera and you can chat with us and connect. And so today, like I said, we want to kind of go through some of what's going on. We want to share a little bit of thanks. We want to give a little bit of inspiration and, just kind of look to the future and see where we're headed. Because I think this is by far the most exciting time in SCN8A. Michael's lab discovered SCN8A in 2011, and it was published in 2012. So, just over 10 years ago, 11 years ago now that we've known about SCN8A, and there is just no doubt that SCN8A is a model for how things can get done quickly in a rare disease. And I think, we have a new blog out on our time at AES. And if you want to read that, I'll put it in the chat in a little bit. It's really remarkable how much progress we've made. And it's really thanks to this community for stepping up and doing the registry and sharing your information and sharing your stories and joining our meetings on Zoom, where we learn so much from you that really starts to guide what we're looking at and what we're trying to discover and dig more into and develop new hypotheses. So we're just super excited to be with you guys today. We can't move forward without acknowledging that February 9th is also Shay's birthday. And I always cry a little bit on the 9th because Shay is why we're all here together. And I just think we're so lucky to have Michael, who, despite the grief and the pain, put all of that and to work towards Shay's legacy, which is bringing us all together and finding better answers for our kids. So we love you, Michael. Thank you for everything you do, sticking with us. And we want to acknowledge that Shay is not, while she was the first known to have passed with SCN8A, there are plenty of others, and we are painfully aware of the urgency with which we need to be working, having lost a number of kids, recently, and always, there's always kids who we're losing far, far too soon. And so our mission is to work with as much urgency as possible to find answers. So we want to start by acknowledging something really, really exciting, which is that in this last year, the mission of the International SCN8A Alliance, which was to bring anyone and everyone working in SCN8A together to try to work as quickly as possible to find answers, because we know we're stronger together, has really taken off. This is our global alliance right now. These are our partners who we work with around the world. We're finding new ways of collaborating and coordinating, building a global research agenda together, and really looking to find ways to expedite all of our work. So thank you so much to these partners. They're amazing. We're really enjoying working with you all, and we know the best is yet to come. And we can't move forward without acknowledging that today, the SCN8A European Federation is official. And we have a message here from Gaby and Cinzia in the Netherlands.
Buongiorno, goedenavond. So today, the SCN8A European Federation is officially established, and that is what we celebrate. Cheers!
Amazing. So it's such an amazing way to mark this day that the Europeans who have already been working together and working to move mountains together to collaborate is official. Find them if you don't already follow them, find them on Facebook and Instagram and all of the European partners, and pay attention because they're doing great stuff. They're telling the stories, they're advocating, and we're just really thrilled that we're working alongside each other now. Oops, I already did that. One of the things we also want to highlight that has just been incredibly remarkable over the last couple of years is these network meetings where, you know, there is no other community in the world that has a geneticist that is in the group and meets weekly with families to help educate them on the genetics, learn more, contribute, you know, put all of what we're learning towards the registry that we're constantly improving and trying to build on. So you may have seen that we've recently kind of did a reworking of our schedule of meetings to try to better fit meeting with as many families as possible. So these are our new meetings. We kind of have broken things out to have families meet with other families who are going through the things that they're likely also going through. So for example, our loss of function meeting has expanded to also talk about behavioral and emotional challenges, right? So if your kid is having issues with behavior or with, you know, anxiety, you know, that's a very different story than if you're like my son Elliot, where, you know, his major issues are, you know, respiratory challenges and GI issues. And, but we're constantly learning that there's overlap. So the idea is that you can join any one of these meetings at any time. It's a place for community. Come and join. We're looking to test the system, see how these meetings work together. We currently have rotating language meetings where we've got Japanese, Chinese, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. We're hoping this year that we can start doing some meetings maybe in Italian and French. If you have a language you want to see a meeting in, let us know. Help us gather some families and we'll make it happen. I mean, that's the idea, is we want to connect with families, we want to engage, and we want to hear your experiences. One exciting new thing is that we're going to have special webinars where Michael does data dumps, you know, for lack of a better term. There is a much better term. I shouldn't have used that term, but there are better terms. But the idea really is that this is a chance for you to come and really see what we're learning from the registry. It is so voluminous, the amount of information that's in there. And we are working to hire new people, bring more people in. Michael will talk about how we are using AI, we're using machine learning. You know, we are really trying to pull everything we can and then share this data outwardly. There's a lot of new publications coming, a lot of new partnerships. So be on the lookout. We also started this last year, our SCN8A Unraveled series, which has been really an exciting way to start bringing academic research to families. Hopefully you've seen them. If you haven't, check it out. There's on our website on scn8alliance.org. We have the 4 that we did last year. We're planning to continue this series. If there's topics, or if you see a paper that comes out and you say, I have no idea what the heck this means, let us know. We will work with that researcher to break it down and learn more. So now we want to turn and just to set the stage too, we're going to be talking at you guys for the next like 20 minutes, and then we're going to talk with you guys. So we'll open it up. So just bear with us because we want to kind of push some information at you to update. And then we'll want to engage you guys in discussion. So I'm going to hand it over to JayEtta now to update on how things are going with working towards the first global consensus on diagnosis and treatment of SCN8A.
Terrific. Thanks, Gaby. Why don't you go to the next slide? The key question is why you do this, although every one of you knows why it's so important. Our kids have such a wide spectrum, and there's no understanding, regardless of whether they're the severe and more frequently seen or neurodevelopmental without any epilepsy. There's just no protocols. There's no standard understanding about what the best approaches are. So we just moved into that vacuum, and the goals were really twofold, really to get some consensus about the key areas of interest. And this was based on a survey that we did of families. What are the key things you want to know? We want to know about different types of ways 8A presents, which is phenotypes, different kinds of treatments and how they vary for different phenotypes, and the comorbidities, not only to be aware and to get the referrals that you need, but to really have some idea of the next category, prognosis. You know, if my child has this level now, are they going to improve? And we have finally some data that will talk about the difference of prognosis by phenotypes. And that's a pretty important gap for families, having some idea of what the future may hold. So in addition to these areas of consensus that really help doctors and help families, one of the benefits of going through this process is we also document what the critical knowledge gaps are. Where don't we have consensus? Where isn't there enough data? And what kind of research is really most essential for trying to advance the research to get answers in those targeted areas. The key thing about what we're doing here, it's taken a long time and it's very tedious, but it is a standardized, accepted scientific method. And it has these steps. We'll make these slides available. So if you want to spend more time, I'm just going to skip over it, but there's a very rigorous step of consensus building. And we've been following it very rigorously. The key thing on the right, though, is we have the leading clinicians all over the globe. There are 29 of them, and they're the most experienced clinicians. We have with the we have 31% of them see more than 8A patients. And as most of you know, there's not a lot of those in the world, but all of them, I think, are participating. So we've got the leading clinicians working with 8A and have been doing so for a number of years. And then the caregivers are a fundamental part of the process, and they have kids of different ages and different phenotypes. Next slide. So the phenotypes that are emerging, most of you will see this align with a lot of the way Michael talks about the different types of presentation, is that there's a severe, there's a mixed epilepsy that's primarily tonic-clonic and focal, but differs from the severe, that it doesn't have the infantile spasms, or rarely does. It doesn't have the myoclonic seizures. So there's not just severity, but different types of seizures. So it's a different presentation. The third is the generalized epilepsy. This is generalized, meaning primarily absence seizures, which are, not focal, not just in one part of the brain. So it's that absence is dominant. They have other seizures, but what's unique is that this group is dominant in the frequency of absence seizures. And they also have a later onset, and the comorbidities tend to be different. We call them mild, moderate, but many of them are very significant challenges, and we're going to get that kind of data. Selfie is something we've, in our community, not come across. It's called self-limited. So these are kids who have 8A, but it clears up in the first year. So they have the seizures, but it's self-limiting. And in our community, we don't find them because by the time they find the community, it's resolved. And so they tend not to be active in the community. And then, as I mentioned before, there's the fifth area of the neurodevelopmental delays and intellectual issues, but without epilepsy. And there's wide agreement about these phenotypes. Next slide. I'll skip through these quickly because there's a lot of data here, but as I was mentioning, the different phenotypes have a different first symptom, they have a different age of onset of seizures and a different age of onset of developmental delays. And these are some of the ways we may be able to get earlier diagnosis. When these profiles are published, we get doctors more open, particularly for the later onset, that these could still be a genetic epilepsy and you need to get testing to identify those. Next slide. This is just from the first phase. We have this initial data on the most frequent non-seizure issues in the severe DEEs. Not a surprise to this group, but we've got consensus. And so we'll have doctors having a record to help you anticipate and be more open to early referrals. The second phase, we're getting this data on all of the comorbidities for all of the other phenotypes. So there's a richness and depth. Treatment is the preference, of course, for sodium channel blockers and the gain of function, avoiding sodium channel blockers and the loss of function, and some agreement toward different types of medications that work with the loss of function. Next slide. So the conclusions are, I was just summarizing for the first of 3 rounds. As I mentioned, the next round is going to really develop more data on the comorbidities and further refine the consensus about the characteristics of the different phenotypes. What's important to share is that, as I mentioned about the research, we're not going to stop with just an article that's published. We're going to turn this into briefings that we will try to arrange all over the world with the clinicians who've been involved and families who've been involved, and provide education and briefing, and also the follow-up on the research implications. So it's been an amazing process, and we thank all of those who've been involved. And we will be offering a full community briefing as we wrap up the conclusions from round 2 and give you a much more detailed discussion about what we're learning and how the rollout, in your view, would be most meaningful to reach all of the doctors, not just these doctors who've been active. So that's what we're learning, and it's powerful.
Yeah, thanks. That's super exciting. And I think this is going to lead right into what we're talking about next, which is, given that there are going to be so many gaps, we know, all of you know, right? You see doctors and they have no idea what to do. They don't understand. They don't know that GI issues are a big challenge for our kids, both gain of function and we're learning loss of function, quite a number. But we're hearing from you in the registry a lot of the gaps that doctors don't know about. So at the end of this process, what we're going to do is we're going to turn to the registry. We're going to turn back to your information and then do education with clinicians about what you say the problems are, right? Because you, all of us parents, are experts in SCN8A more so than any clinician. So Michael, I'm going to hand it over to you to dig in a little bit, share some sneak peeks of stuff that we got going on.
Sure. Well, thank you. And first of all, I'd like to say there's nowhere I'd rather be than with you, this community on this day. It's always a hard day, but I also see what the legacy that my daughter is leaving, and it's very moving. And I get so much of my grief relief from working with you all. So that's what motivates me. The connection to what we've just heard is that we know little about SCN8A from a treatment perspective. We're learning a lot about it from a phenotypic perspective. And as JayEtta said, there's only a handful of clinicians that have seen more than 5 or 6 patients. So they don't know the full spectrum as a clinician in their practice, but we do, because we see hundreds of you. And when you participate in the registry questionnaire study, you're adding your piece of information, your view of SCN8A into the totality, and it's the totality that we need to make intelligent decisions about treatment. And what I'm ultimately interested in is that we know that the existing treatments don't work that well. We know that there's some clinical trials happening and on the horizon that may improve that outcome. But the question is, will these new treatments serve everyone? Will everyone benefit? And so we have to look at the spectrum and see if there are subgroups within the spectrum that will require precision medicine approaches. So that's sort of where I think the registry is going to go in the future, as well as looking at the longitudinal, the changes that occur in each individual over time and seeing what triggers there are, and if medication can make a difference to the important things like cognition and developmental skill acquisition. So what I'm just going to kind of run through is some of the things we've learned, some of the things we're doing using sort of scientific methods and machine learning, because there's so much data any individual can't wrap their mind around it. We need special methods to dig in and see what's going on. So this is just an overview slide. I want to point out, you've all seen this before. There's 4 domains to this NAV 1.6 channel. And within each domain, there's 6 repeating segments, 1 through 6. They all have slightly different functions, and they work together in a, this is a more 3-dimensional view as a channel pore, which lets sodium in from outside the neuron inside the cell. And that's a very highly regulated process. And if it's disturbed in any way, it can lead to hyperexcitability or the lack of function of the channel, which has severe disease outcomes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this situation of the gain and loss of function, because the first thing a doctor needs to know when you present with SCN8A is it gain or loss of function? As Gaby pointed out, that medications for loss of function, you wouldn't want to use the same medications. You wouldn't want to use a sodium channel blocker. And that's this. The other thing I'll say right from the outset is that getting treatment as soon as you can after initial symptoms appear, we know that that's important as well. We're tracking that in our registry. So you all know about the registry. It's a comprehensive database of everything we want to know about SCN8A. It's derived from you all as families, and the information flow is two-way between us running the registry and you as families, and we have these meetings to try and give back as much as we're learning every week. And we're in the active process of publishing several papers right now. So it's an exciting year. You're going to see papers coming out this year from the registry, 3 or 4. And I'm going to update you on things that we're doing that are coming beyond the papers. But it serves clinicians, it serves researchers, it serves pharma, because pharma needs to know the spectrum and the outcome measures they're going to use in trials, and we can help provide that information through a natural history process. We all know, again, as we've stated many times, the spectrum is broad. It goes from individuals with SCN8A that don't have epilepsy, they have movement disorders and behavioral issues, all the way through to, on the other end, the severe DEE, developmental and epileptic encephalopathy, which can be severe in the sense of cognition, movement disorders, not being able to be ambulatory, not having cognition or speech, things like that. So it's very severe on that end of the spectrum, and everything in the middle. The question we want to know is, as I said, can we classify patients into these different subgroups, which represent in the total as a spectrum, but in specific, different subgroups that would require different treatments. And I'm going to also present a little data showing that your genetic variant may be very predictive of which subgroup you're in. But if we look at the population as a whole, I'm going to report on 381 individuals that we have enough data to do some of this analysis, while we know the total number of SCN8A individuals in the world is probably over 700. It's a little bit hard to keep track now at this point, because there's so many different publications and groups, and we don't know if the same subjects are in the different groups, duplicating the numbers, but we think pretty surely there's over 700. You can see that their age distribution runs mainly from the very young ages of about 6 to 9 years old over here in this peak, all the way out to more than 40 years old. We know somebody who's 60, there's somebody that's 47, and there are others in their 30s and 20s. So there are likely many more people of older age that just never got tested, but that's the distribution that we're aware of right now. And it's about a 50-50 male-female split, and 90-some% have seizures. And why did 10% not have seizures? Well, I'm going to explain that in a second. The channel, the NAV 1.6 channel, sits at a very important part of the neuron called the nodes of Ranvier and the axon initial segment. These parts of the channel, the axon initial segment is the part that decides whether a neuron is going to fire an action potential. And the NaV1.6 or the SCN8A gene product is the master regulator of excitability in the sense that it's the one that's going to decide if the neuron's going to fire this action potential and communicate with neurons downstream. And when things go off and there's too much of that firing, then that leads to hyperexcitability and seizures. The nodes of RANVA also are particularly prone to injury from any kind of brain injury. So what's really fascinating is that SCN8A should be relevant to other fields like traumatic brain injury, because there's a part of the neuron that's damaged during an injury like a concussion or head blow to the head, and that activates SCN8A. So I think one of the things that I think on the research end that's important is to show that SCN8A is not only important to the epilepsy community, the pediatric epilepsy community, but I think it's going to be important to other neurodegenerative diseases as we learn more as we go forward. But the point I want to make here is that some variants are loss of function. They cause the channel not to open at all or not to open enough. And so then you get a decreased channel activity, which leads to the neurodevelopmental delays with or without seizures. And then you have the increased function, which leads to seizures. And so in general, there's these two broad groups. And the loss of function group is rapidly growing because more and more people are getting tested and they're finding out they have SCN8A. Over here, so 54% of the loss of function group has seizures. The seizures they have are typically different. They're more absence seizures, as we discussed. But here are some of the other challenges that are suffered by those with loss of function on this supposedly L-shaped word cloud for loss in English. And you can see there's myoclonus, absence seizures, autism, ADHD, behavioral problems, and delayed speech is very, very common in this group. And the G in English for the word gain of function, you can see there are many more issues that are suffered by these patients. 100% have seizures. And there's many different seizure types, as you know. And it's not that they don't have autistic features, they do, but it's sort of a different context when you're a gain of function. And you can see we have developmental delay, ataxia, intellectual disability, all kinds of dysautonomia features, GI features, hypotonia, all these things can go with the gain of function. And we're really looking at those comorbidities to see if they're specific to different groups. Now, you want to know if you have a gain or loss, but to do that, you generally have to have your variant tested in a laboratory setting. It's very expensive. It's not done in a hospital or a clinical lab setting. You need to have a research lab do it. And fortunately, there have been a couple hundred of these studies and published in the literature. So we can go look in the literature to see which variants have been deemed to be gain or loss of function. But to actually get it done for your own variant you'd have to find a researcher in a lab somewhere. So what we've decided to do is to say, can we take the known cases of gain and loss of function from the literature, look into our registry, look in the literature, then look to see what the associated phenotypes are of those gain and loss of functions to see if we can predict from just a few features of each patient if you're likely to have gain or loss of function. And we've done that. We've built a model. We call it it was based on a machine learning thing called random forest. It's a predictor based on, so you make a truth set, you take all the individuals that are gain of function and loss of function, you look at their phenotypes and you say, how many of those associated with gain or loss? And then you build a model and you say, can I predict? And this shows you on a three-dimensional space, the gain of function patients on the top of the plane and the loss of function patients on the bottom of the plane with very little overlap. So there's some little bit of overlap in their phenotypic or their features, but not much. So what it's saying to us is gain and loss of function have very different outcomes that we should be able to see early on. And when I say early on, this is based on 30-some features. But when we break it down to 5 key features that clinicians will see when you initially present to a doctor, things like, did you develop seizures? Were the seizures convulsive or motor seizures, or were they absence seizures? What was the age of onset? Those are very predictive of whether it's gain or loss of function. So there are different types of variants that you could have that would go with loss of function. All the gain of function variants are missense variants, which is just an amino acid substitution due to a single change in the DNA. But there are other DNA changes that could lead to loss of function. Some are missense, and some are this category called truncating. So when you lose a copy of the gene, you lose a function of the channel, which causes a loss of function phenotype. There are different ways you could lose the channel, one copy of the channel. One is a missense variant causes the gene, the protein product not to find the appropriate place to be expressed. Another is there is something called a nonsense mutation, which causes the protein translation process to stop early. And then there's something called a frame shift. You could look at your variant. If you've got an FS or a star or a TER after the mutation name that was given to you in your genetic report, then we know it's a loss of function. But the ones that are more difficult to predict are the missense variants that could be gain or loss. But that's what our model does. And that's why it's so important that we get this out. So we have a paper coming out very soon that should help inform clinicians on how to do this prediction. Now, just turning to the gain of function, which is a more complicated set of phenotypes that we know are going to be difficult to find subgroups in to treat differently. But here you see the age at onset is very early, mean of 3.6 months. For these are only the gain of function. And then the seizure types, mainly generalized tonic-clonic, but you can see focal, tonic, myoclonic, and infantile spasms are all common seizure types with gain of function. The medications that have been tried and failed and then are on currently in the registry questionnaire, the ones we ask you to say which medications you're on currently and which ones have you weaned. We show that, levetiracetam, Keppra, we known for a while now, that's not a good medication, although 1 in 10 SCN8A individuals does well with Keppra. It's one of the most often prescribed first medications before you have a genetic test, as is phenobarbital, and both are quite often weaned. Valproate's the third most common initially prescribed medication, and it's often not weaned. It's roughly 50-50, but you can see that patients generally stay on drugs like carbazepine and some of the other sodium channel blockers on this end of the chart. Unfortunately, as you look at the average across all of our individuals with SCN8A gain of function, only 15% report that they've been seizure-free in the last 6 months. And those that report seizure freedom in the last 6 months tend to be cases where there's much more seizure freedom in general. I've got a couple more slides, so hang in there. I want to just say that there are some, we have over 400 variants now in our database in our over 600 individuals. And we now know that there's 6 sites that are highly recurrent. So there are 20 some individuals with 850Q and 1617Q and 1475R and 1872W and Q and 1877S. And we have now the ability for the first time to take those subgroups of patients and study them in detail to see if there's anything that makes them different, more severe, more mild. And it turns out if you look at just the age of onset, you can see 850, you have almost 44% have their seizures start in the first month of life. That's not a good thing. The earlier the seizures start, the more let's say, challenged the subject is in developing acquiring their developmental skills. The 1872 also has a neonatal onset, but things like 1617 and 1475 have no neonatal onset, which already provides some hint that there is a milder and more severe form based on the variant. And if we plot the percent seizure freedom reported by each of the individuals with these different variants, you can see there's a very good correlation between the age at which the seizures start and the percent reporting seizure freedom. So on the more severe end, you have 1872W and 850. On the milder end, you have 1475 and 1877. The same holds for development. So these individuals will acquire more developmental skills than the individuals on the more severe end of the spectrum. And if we look at the number of medications, there's also a correlation. So the later your onset, the more medications you've tried and failed, the fewer medications you've tried and failed, and the fewer that you are currently maintaining your seizure control on. So again, if I report that the opposite way, the earlier your seizure onsets, the more medications you failed and the more medications you're currently on. So we are building models now to divide our patients up into mild, moderate, and severe groups. We have done some initial work that's been very successful at doing that. And if you look at our population, about 20% are loss of function, 10% mild gain of function, 17% moderate, and over 50% are severe DEE. And each of these variants has a spectrum of patients that correlates, again, with more severe on one end and more mild on the other. So we do believe that different variants are predictive of mild or severe outcome. And as already been discussed, it's not just a seizure disorder. There are many, many comorbidities. I won't go through all of them, but they've been classified here for different body parts: vision and hearing, neurological, developmental or behavioral, musculoskeletal, immune, gastrointestinal, autonomic, and other. And we have now had some initial studies showing that of these categories, different variants do tend to associate with different comorbidities. For 850, there's a significant correlation with vision impairment, cortical vision impairment. And interestingly, for behavioral issues, the severe variants are not associated with behavioral issues. It's the milder variants that are associated with behavioral issues. That's why we've decided to have our network meetings combine loss of function with mild gain of function, because it's the shared characteristics of those different variant types that make for a conversation in our network meetings that are more relevant to the participants. And just to summarize everything that I've said about the gain and the loss of function, the gain of function is associated with this spectrum going from mild to moderate to severe DEE. The loss of function, you have both neurodevelopmental delay without epilepsy, neurodevelopmental delay with generalized epilepsy or absence seizures. We think there's a hidden third category in here. And then the variant, the different categories are associated to some degree with different variants. So the 850 and 1872W are more on the severe end, than 1877S, 1475R on the milder end. And even with the truncating variants, the missense variants tend to be associated with NDD without epilepsy, and the truncating variants tend to be those associated with generalized epilepsies. So I just wanted to end by saying thank you to the families who've participated in this work. We can't do this without you, and your continued participation will be critical for us to take us to the next level of looking at what medications work and don't work, and what the longitudinal changes are as your child develops, what we can predict when children go through puberties. Are things going to get worse or get better, et cetera? And we really invite you to join our network meetings. They're fantastic, and we learn so much both ways. So if you want to get involved with this research, there's also, you go to scn8a.net, and there's a button up there at the top saying get involved with the research, and you can then join the registry and help us with this project going forward.
Awesome. So, I mean, you just jam-packed a lot in there, and there's so much more. And I think this is really the plug for these meetings, because we really start digging into this information there and starting to unravel, and just the revelations that families have on the meetings, where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Somebody else is dealing with this. How did you manage it? What can we do? You know, we look in the registry, kids who have this issue, maybe this helps, you know. So I think it's not just about research. It's not just about connection. It's about all of these things, right? It's really doing everything at the same time, which is really incredibly powerful. We are moving along because we have a lot to get through, but basically I accidentally somehow skipped over this beautiful slide that Elise made. Elise is our visual guru. And this just represents all of the clinicians that we're working with on the diagnosis and treatment guidelines. And it's just a beautiful representation of how global this effort is. We really wanted to make sure this was not a, how do we do things in the US kind of thing. This is really with Latin America, Central America, or not Central, we don't have Central, sorry. But we do have, you know, all over the US, Canada, Japan, India, Australia, Denmark, Poland, China, Israel. I mean, it's just really an incredible experience to be connected with all of these families. I mean, all these clinicians who want to, they're volunteering. They just said, yeah, I'll help. Let's do this. This is really important. So a huge thank you to all of them. We want to also now, we asked Neurocrine and Praxis, who everyone knows are working in SCN8A, to share some messages with families on Awareness Day. And so I'm going to take you through first one from Neurocrine, and this is Dietrich, Chief Medical Officer.
Hello, my name is Dietrich Haubenberger. I'm the Executive Medical Director at Neurocrine Biosciences, a biopharmaceutical company dedicated to providing breakthrough treatments for patients in need with rare and under-addressed diseases, including SCN8A epilepsy. On behalf of our company, I want to take a moment to thank you for your continued participation in initiatives that support SCN8A research, such as patient registries and surveys. Your participation provides important information that can make a real difference. Data collected from patient registries and surveys enable us to design clinical trials that are meaningful and relevant to patients. Especially in ultra-rare disorders like SCN8A, the information that you provide as the ultimate experts is pivotal to advance scientific understanding and the quest for effective treatments. They also help us educate the broader community, including regulatory agencies, about SCN8A-related epilepsies and why it's so important to develop new therapies. This SCN8A Awareness Day, I'd like to encourage you to keep participating however you can. Enroll in patient registries, keep taking surveys, and speak up and share your experience with your healthcare provider and community representatives. Your input is critical in helping us address the major unmet needs in treating SCN8A, and we truly appreciate your involvement. Everyone's contribution counts because together we can make a difference. Thank you. Hello, my name.
You don't need to hear from him again. So thanks to Dietrich and the team at Neurocrine. And this is Praxis.
Hi, my name is Brian Pfister. I'm the Vice President of Medical Affairs at Praxis Precision Medicines. Today, on International SCN8A Awareness Day, you, your families, and your children are front and center for the rest of the world. We're here on this very special day to say thank you for all that you do, for your courage, your partnership, your resilience, and all the time and effort you put into caring for and finding new solutions for your children. For anyone that doesn't know Praxis, we're a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company working on innovative new treatments for patients with CNS disorders with particular focus on genetic epilepsies, including SCN8A. We're happy to have a long-standing partnership with the SCN8A community, and we're happy and pleased to support many of your programs, including the Health Literacy SCN8A Unraveled series. Today, we're also pleased to celebrate the 8th anniversary of the International SCN8A Registry with you. Participating in a registry or research studies takes valuable time and effort, and we want you to know that your efforts translate directly into the development of new potential treatments for your children. For example, we used insights from the registry to prepare for our clinical trial Prax562, our precision anti-seizure drug candidate in development for SCN8A and 2A. The insights from the registry were critical in helping us to understand the lived experience of SCN8A and create a patient-guided clinical trial program. We're thrilled to share that Prax562 trial, called the EMBOLD study, is beginning pre-qualification of participants right now. So to learn more about that, please visit emboldstudy.com. Once again, thank you for all that you do. Today on SCN8A Awareness Day, we celebrate you, the courage and the meaningful work of the International SCN8A Alliance, Michael Hammer, and the entire SCN8A community. Thank you.
Awesome. So I think there's no question that the way that families contribute is really making a difference. And we work very closely with these companies to help them refine their understanding of SCN8A and where we can learn more. We also want to take this chance to share a message from one of our partners in Spain, our partners Aurora and Vanesa, who wanted to send a message out today to the community.
Hola, somos Vanesa y Aurora. Somos fundadoras de SCN8A España. Somos una asociación pequeñita de 15 familias españolas y agrupamos también a familias de Latinoamérica. Nos une el idioma y un objetivo común.
En un día como hoy, en el que se conmemora el SCN8A, estamos encantados de poder formar parte de International SCN8A Alliance, porque para nosotros es un auténtico placer colaborar con otras asociaciones y juntos estamos seguros que vamos a lograr lo mejor para nuestros hijos. Muchas gracias y a seguir trabajando así.
Un abrazo.
Un abrazo.
Hugs from them. And then we also wanted to bring a bit of a message of hope. I think all of you know Madeleine, who is mom to Margot, who is 2 years old and also happens to be somebody who was studying sodium channels in her lab before her daughter was diagnosed with SCN8A. So she brings a really unique perspective, and wanted to share some of her insights and hopes, kind of where we're headed. And then we're going to hear from Dr. John Schreiber in just a minute after this message. So stick with us and start thinking about if you have things you want to say or chime in with, raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we'll get to you in just a minute.
Hi, everyone. I'm Madeleine Oudin, parent to Margot, who has SCN8A, who's 2 years old. And I'm also a researcher and who's recently started doing SCN8A research and getting into the community. And so I was invited today to share some of my perspective on exciting things that are happening in the SCN8A research space and what we have to get excited about and be hopeful about moving forward for new treatments for our children. So the first thing I think that was pretty cool this year was a review article that was published by leaders in this space in pediatric epilepsies called Precision Medicine for Genetic Epilepsy on the Horizon, Recent Advances, Present Challenges, and Suggestions for Continued Progress. And they talked about, 50 most commonly mutated genes that cause epilepsy in children. And then they focused in on SCN8A as really the poster child for the gene where it was the closest time from coming from that initial discovery of the gene back in 1995 by Miriam Meisler, then finding it in humans and Shay Hammer in 2012, to then 10 years later, having 2 drugs in clinical trials. And
did the audio cut out for everyone else?
Another thing is,
sorry, everyone.
I think this year we've seen a lot of new people come into the SCN8A research space. So we have a really exciting.
Sorry, folks, hit a little audio cut out there, but she was saying something really
advocacy, cool. Amazing researchers, and that.
So I want to,
really SCN8A is seen in the community as the poster child, as the gene where we have this amazing advocacy, amazing researchers, and that we've been able to make so much progress. So that's really exciting. Another thing is, I think this year we've seen a lot of new people come into the SCN8A research space. So we have a really exciting study coming out of Sick Kids in Toronto, where Julia and Cam Kilner, parents to Maddie, who has SCN8A, raised over 120,000 Canadian dollars to run a study with patient blood samples to discover blood biomarkers for SCN8A. And this is exciting to kind of be doing that in a new direction. I've also started research in my own lab, and my husband and I have really recruited 3 or 4 labs to help us with this. So the community of people that are doing SCN8A is growing every year. And the more people we have working on this and trying to understand how this gene works is going to help us develop better treatments for our children. Then I think this year I had the opportunity to attend a couple of epilepsy meetings and really saw strong showing from the community. So many people working on SCN8A, coming to the meetings, talking about their work, SCN8A mouse models being used. It was really exciting. I think it was really the DEE, the pediatric epilepsy, that was mentioned the most. And it was cool to see all the research that different labs are doing on how SCN8A regulates brain activity in different cell types in the brain, trying different treatments for it, building new models to study the disease. So there's really a lot of exciting research going on by some amazing scientists. And lastly, I think, we're seeing new genetic treatments that are coming on. We have some exciting work from Miriam Meisler's lab on antisense oligonucleotides. So these little pieces of DNA that can specifically alter the amount of a specific gene or change the way the gene functions. And so these are kind of a new way of treating diseases. And she had some really exciting data. Our daughter Margot is accepted in the N. Lorem Foundation as one of about 70 patients. They're also developing a treatment, an ASO treatment. And so, any data that we can get from treating an SCN8A patient with an ASO, will be really valuable for treating more kids. So that's exciting to see this technology being applied to SCN8A and seeing, how this will then impact the patients. And I think looking around too, this year, there's a new clinical trial that started for Dravet, which is SCN1A. So it's a different gene, but it's still sodium channel. And this is using an ASO to try and correct the disease. So this isn't no longer just treating it with drugs, trying to, stop the symptoms. This is actually the closest thing to fixing a mutation in a sodium channel that can cause epilepsy. And this trial has shown some really interesting results. It's still ongoing, but I think there'll be a lot to learn from that and how these genetic treatments that, again, we're trying to fix it, not actually just treat it, whether, how much this can help kids with their seizures, but also with their developmental delays. So I'm really excited to see this trial go on and that we can use what we learn to help our kids with SCN8A. So those are some of the reasons that I think seeing everything that's happening in the last year in this space make me really hopeful as a scientist and as a parent. And I'm excited to see where we're going to go next. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Madeleine, for sending that in. We're so excited that we have her working with us, and she's going to be actually joining the International SCN8A Alliance board. So we're going to be able to kind of keep her really tightly in the loop and help us make decisions about where to go from here. So thank you, John, for joining us. We're really excited to have a clinician who really gets SCN8A joining us to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing. I'd asked you to highlight the SCN8A clinic that you run at Children's National, and feel free to share anything else that you're working on in SCN8A or that you're hopeful about.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to see all of you. So yeah, we many of you participated in this multidisciplinary clinic. It really helped us to understand a lot more about the phenotype and what this looks like on a very detailed, granular level, and report some of those findings. So especially as we're developing these consensus guidelines, which I'm sure you've talked about already, I think that work has been very useful in helping to better delineate that and how we see, how SCN8A can present, not only in terms of epilepsy and cognitive problems, but other kind of what we call comorbidities. So that's been really useful. And for me, clinician, in helping to think about these guidelines, it really gives us a lot more context. So thank you to all those that have participated in that and are continuing to do so. We're actually now delving more into the developmental phenotype. So some of you might have participated with, I've got a resident working with me, collecting more developmental information, including a Vineland and quality of life assessment. That really helps us understand more about the different domains that are impacted by SCN8A in regards to a child's development. And that work is ongoing. So we're excited about that and excited to see what the results that come out of that. Can you all hear me okay? Good, okay. A few other things we've been working on, you might have I've already discussed. I'm sorry, we're in the midst of our own conferences today. So I haven't been able to attend this whole session. But you may have talked about the investigators workshop we had at AES, the American Epilepsy Society. You probably know it's a big epilepsy professional conference we have every year, and there's 6,000 or 7,000 people that attend, usually mostly in person. And this was a very well attended investigators workshop that included Gaby and Michael and some other folks that are doing work on SCN8A and other developmental and epileptic encephalopathies. The focus of this was, how do we look at non-seizure outcomes and things, how do we go beyond just looking at seizures and try to address some of these things that Madeleine was alluding to, because we really want to get into therapies that are potentially disease modifying. And we know that this disease is more than just seizures. So how do we, the first step in that is, how do we characterize this? How do we look at these non-seizure outcomes and then to then prove that a new therapy is actually doing something to address that? So it was very exciting to see that this session was so well attended. I was just so happy to have such amazing speakers there, including many others on this panel. But that was very exciting. We are also participating in the clinical trial that's going on for SCN8A right now. And Madeleine just talked about the ASO trial for Dravet syndrome. We are participating in that too. And as she said, this is the first time you're using it's sort of like gene therapy. It's kind of gene therapy adjacent, but using an antisense oligonucleotide to actually address the genetic cause, as opposed to, using a small molecule or something that's affecting, some normal signaling. This is actually addressing the underlying genetic cause. So, and now we're seeing more and more of these trials, at least people are thinking about them, and now actually some are coming to fruition. So that's been really exciting. And lastly, I've also been very fortunate to continue to work with Dr. Hammer, who's just incredible, and the registry that so many of you also contributed to. I've been able to help kind of give a clinical perspective to some of that and help answer some questions, but just tremendous to see the work that they've done. And after years and years of building this registry, really starting to see some great results. We've been seeing some great results in that for a little while now, but it's been fun to be a part of that and helping Michael and his team kind of dig into that some to better understand phenotypes and functional effects and all this stuff. It's just been really exciting for me too. So just happy to be part of this. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for all the work you do. Obviously, you do a lot in the SCN8A community. We know you also help plan the TCSF annual meeting, which is an incredible place for families to come together and hear from more clinicians and researchers. So you're a steady and reliable part of the SCN8A clinical team. And it's been really great to be working with you on many different levels. So thanks for that. We got a couple minutes and I just want to open it up here. Of course, if there's families who want to say something, want to ask something, raise your hand, put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A, any of these multimedia type things. I just want to open it back up now to Michael, JayEtta, at least anybody who wants to say something about kind of where we're headed. I think, there's obviously so much going on. We've only touched the surface here. There's so much more happening. There's labs we're talking to that are exploring CRISPR for SCN8A. There are labs that are creating novel or testing. Even Michael's lab, frankly, is testing, treatments for SCN8A that are, approved medications. Could we find something that already exists? We don't have to go through massive clinical trials to help. So it's such a hopeful time. And we hope that, we're able to leave you all with a little bit of hope today about where we're headed, how important it is to stay involved. I know early on, it felt like, gosh, I can't do anything. And it's so, you feel so powerless. And really it's the most powerful thing you can do is engage, share your story, share your information with the registry, and be a part of helping us find a solution. I'm hopeful that we're not far off from really some treatments that will, be different. All these current medicines that our kids are on, I'm sure John would say they're like a Band-Aid, right? Nothing is actually built for our kids' disorder, right? And nothing is really working. So we're on the horizon of some big stuff, I think. I'll be quiet now. Somebody else can talk.
You give everyone an opportunity if they have a comment or a question.
Yeah. I'm watching for families are being shy, which is okay. But I know a lot of you, I see, oh, good. Here's someone. Kristen, I know people are not shy in this community. So Kristen, you're unmuted. Let's see.
I think she's still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I was just going to let you know the chat is actually disabled.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
So people might not be dropping things in there because at least
Probably
mine
the
is.
reason why. Okay. Well,
So I assume everybody else's is as well.
Someday I'll figure out how to use technology. I'm not sure when, but
I still love you. You're amazing. The whole panel is amazing. Thank you so much for all you do.
thanks, hon. Glad you could be with us today. Anyone else, feel free to raise your hand because I'm technology.
Something you put in the chat. Yeah, something you wanted to put in the chat but couldn't, but now's the chance just to make a comment or something.
Yeah. Let me see, we've got folks from all over the world joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you with us. I mean, we know that this is a disorder that cannot discriminate, right? It doesn't matter where you live, how much, what kind of degrees you have, this is, it impacts everyone. So we're really feel so lucky to be able to connect with people from around the world. And just, I keep coming back to these meetings because it's so incredibly powerful. Our loss of function and behavior and emotional meeting was so intense. We had a couple of weeks ago, because there's these new revelations that came up. People are talking, one family brought up that, swimming and chlorine, was there something going on there? And then other family rose their hand, another family, and we put it in the group and posed that, and more families, started talking, and we're dissecting it. Is it the chlorine? Is it the temperature change? What's happening there? So it's just this wealth of information and, frankly, new ideas, new theories about where to go, that are, helping us move things forward. I see Gemma. Hey, Gemma.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
So my question is, obviously Michael touched on, the numbers, like obviously I call them numbers, on the different variants of like where like severe and like the different things. Obviously the twins have 2 variants. So all I want to know, where would they kind of sit? Because obviously the numbers are like obviously completely different of the 2 variants that obviously they have.
Yeah, so there are occasionally there's more complicated situations like this where there's 2 SCN8A variants, and that can change a loss of function into a gain of function outcome. And it could be that one of those variants is a variant of uncertain significance, is not doing much, and the other one is dominant. If I recall, in your situation, your children fit more into the loss of function phenotype, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the 2 variants are either working together to cause a loss of function, or one of them is dominant and loss of function. But those are the kinds of things we need to know more about. And you're not the only family with 2 variants. And so we have the unique opportunity to investigate what's going on. We have a family with a grandma, mom, and son, and the grandma, there was a mutation that caused a loss of function in the mom, and the mom had a child, and the child got a gain of function and a loss of function, and he's very severe because he has a loss of function in combination with a gain of function, and that's a situation we are involved in studying.
Yeah.
So it's, hopefully we'll learn more as we go forward, but I think in your case, you could probably feel pretty confident that it's a loss of function situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting because we also have, we have another mom on with us who's going through this too. Megan, I know that are we gain? Are we lost? We have GI issues, but we have, she's walking and she's talking, and, so it's like, there's still so much that we have to learn. And, I think we'll continue to learn new things, and new elements will emerge as we continue to hear from families about their experiences. I think that's going to be how the many, many different presentations and ways our kids experience SCN8A are going to emerge. JayEtta, I saw you were talking, but
yeah, I was on mute. I wanted to share with folks how unique our community is to have these weekly opportunities to meet with Michael and have these kinds of discussions. We work with lots through Deep Connections. We work with dozens of other rare epilepsy groups. And maybe once a year, they have a geneticist come and speak to the group. Once a year. And we don't have these kind of discussions. We don't have these opportunities to learn and to probe and to, as Michael said, create new hypotheses. I think the emergence of the whole issue of premature puberty came out from some of these groups. And then people started talking about it, and then Michael added it as a question, and now we're starting to collect data on that, and whether it's how it's related to the disorder, how it relates to seizures, what you do. And that's why these meetings are bi-directional. It's not like a briefing to just tell you the data, which Michael does share the data, but it is so powerful, and it's part of what's accelerating progress. And we just encourage folks to come to any single one. We keep talking about how they're different, but Tammy comes to every single one. I think you haven't been to the Japanese one yet, but people can come to the ones in other languages because we have a translator.
Yeah.
So if the time of one doesn't work, come to another one. There's no limitation, and it's just such a blessing for our community that Shay has so inspired you, Michael, and that your direction went to the whole community and built this community and made it possible for us together. So we're just so blessed by you and Cher, and how much you've brought the hope of answers by bringing us together. So we thank you.
We've got, yeah, we do love you, Michael. We're going to keep saying it. So, and I see that Yolanda raised her hand, and then Carolina and Maggie, I saw you raise your hand. If you want to say something, feel free, but I'm going to go with these folks. So Yolanda.
Hello. Do hormonal changes puberally affect epilepsy by SCN8A?
What changes? I missed the beginning.
Changes by epilepsy, puberally changes epilepsy.
Right. Oh yeah, no. So that's what we're discussing. We've noticed that puberty often is too soon for SCN8A children. And when Shay went through puberty, which was more or less at the right time, I asked my doctor, what are the chances of it getting better or worse? He said about equal probability of getting worse, better, or staying the same. And that frustrated me. But since we noticed there are puberty issues in our children, and we don't know the effect of puberty, and in my mouse model, males and females do differently with respect to how resilient they are to seizures. So there must be hormonal components to how severe the outcome is. And we have so few individuals who have gone through puberty, who are young adults. There's just a lot to learn, and I really think it's important that we find out.
I don't know.
Thank you.
John?
Thank you.
I don't know, John, if you want to weigh in on that.
So I think we do need more data, like you said. I mean, I have the sense that the seizures increase some during puberty, and it's important to know, especially if you're going through it early, to anticipate that. For a lot of epilepsy, seizures will get better after puberty, and I think it probably is a case for 8A as well. But again, more data would be helpful to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And sex differences, if males and females do differently.
Yeah.
Because we know that in the female cycle of estrogen and progesterone is seizure suppressive and estrogen is seizure promotive, and testosterone is not as clear cut.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Megan.
Hey, so on a couple notes with the puberty, what kind of data, because we literally just entered, like she showed early signs of puberty, but did not start until recently, but she started like developing around the age of about 7 to 8 years old, but her menses did not start until 12 and a half. So we are very new into puberty. And what kind of, besides tracking the seizures, what other kind of data would you like us to kind of track? Because they did put her on medication to suppress her menses, and they are scheduling to put in an IUD in May.
Mm-hmm.
And how that affects the data as well, since they are doing, some medications and procedures.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Well, that's a great question, Megan. And I think as we've covered today, it's not just seizures, it's not just a seizure disorder. So we would be interested in any behavioral, developmental, comorbid issues that come along with puberty, and certainly seizures as well.
I think in terms of tracking puberty, I'm not sure if you have a uniform way to do it, but obviously, menses is important, or menarche, the start of menstruation. But there's also things like Tanner staging that we can use clinically, which are not usually known to most lay people, but and it's actually easy enough to do. I mean, you probably could Tanner stage a child without really any training.
Explain what that
and
is
there's,
for-
I'm sorry?
Yeah, what is
I
Tanner?
was just saying, can you explain the
Yeah,
Tanner
yeah. So
staging?
Tanner staging just has to do with pubic hair and like other secondary sex characteristics. So penis and breast growth are the other components of that. It's that and pubic hair. And fairly simple to do that. The other thing is bone age, but most people won't get a bone age. I mean, if you've had x-rays, then you can get a sense for bone age there, and that's also just a marker for how much a child has left to grow. That can be useful.
Yeah. Tammy, I know, is asking in the Q&A about if a child has an S or F in the variant and they have both, is that a way to tell between gain and loss, or are there different letters? And so maybe, Michael, if you want to talk about the meaning of the letters.
Oh yeah, well, FS is frame shift, and that generally leads to a loss of function. An asterisk or a TER or an X after a P dot, that's going to be a loss of function as well. I'd be happy to share some little simple code. So decoding thing you can see.
Yeah.
We'll have to put it on our website or something, or put it on social media so people can tell if their variant is loss of function just from the get-go without even have to think about a test or anything.
Yeah. And I think for Tammy, it's a little different. It's not an S, it's not an FS. I think for Tammy,
Oh
it's
no,
an
Tammy's
S,
is a
and then it has
missense.
to really
Yeah,
start.
That's
Right.
what I interpreted. Yeah, right. So
yeah, no,
those are the amino acids.
sorry, Tammy, that clearly it's a gain of function in your case.
And those are the amino acid changes. Those are an abbreviation for the amino acids that have swapped.
Exactly.
Right.
The
right.
first letter is the amino acid that is typically present, and then the second letter or 3-letter code is the amino acid that was substituted for the wild type. We call it wild type in genetics.
Which means like the way things appear naturally.
Consensus, yeah, the one that is physiologically normal.
So sometimes you'll see like S, or sometimes you'll see SER for Syrian.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 1-letter and a 3-letter amino acid code.
And you will not have any idea what that means unless you look it up, because some of them are like an L means like the letters don't always align with. It's something you have to imprint on your brain when you start doing this work, I think.
Can I drop things in the chat? Because I have a nice little disc that does.
Please.
Let me
Totally.
see if I can grab that.
And I know Megan's got, and John, I know you might have to run back to your conference. If you
Yeah,
need
I got to go. Ashley, thank you. But yeah, if there are any other questions or you want to participate in anything we're doing, please let me know. Just reach out and email. We can share that in the chat. I can put it before I leave. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
joining, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
All right. And I know Megan had, go ahead, Megan, if you wanted to clarify something else. And anyone else who wants to say something, please feel free to drop or raise your hand or put something in the Q&A, which does work.
So I guess this is more so about the work that you guys are doing. We saw genetics last month, and they used a lot of the Alliance stuff to model what should we possibly be watching with Chloe. So they did refer her for a bone scan. So we're in the process of that because we had some x-rays show the mild osteopenia. And then today we saw the cardiologist, and he mentioned the mice studies that someone's doing. And he knew who Michael was and is kind of modeling that on how should Chloe be possibly monitored, and that they are seeing your guys' work and looking at that. Some of our physicians are, as to model what should we be watching, what could come up, and things like that. So I did want to let you know that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Megan.
Yeah, it's great. Let's see. I think
I dropped I think it just said.
it didn't go to everyone. You have to change it so it goes to everyone, not just panelists.
It only gives me the option to reply to hosts and panelists.
Someday we will figure this all out. I'll drop it in there.
Okay. But that's a wheel that tells you what the single letter, because there's a couple different abbreviations for all amino acids. There's a 3 and a single amino acid, a single
letter
abbreviation, and then that little wheel will tell you what's what.
Great. I don't see any other hands up, but if somebody has a question, feel free to jump in here. Otherwise, we know we're past time. I think we could go on forever talking about all this stuff, but we know people have a lot to get back to. So I think from here, I think, the International SCN8A Alliance, after we publish the diagnosis and treatment guidelines, we're going to move on to developing a global research agenda based on the gaps that appear with the in clinical care, right? Where we know there's things that are happening that that are not showing up with clinicians, and we want to document that. For example, Tammy, I know, is very vocal about the really intense GI issues that come up with a lot of kids for gain of function. And I don't think that the clinicians totally get that. They don't see our whole kid and the vomiting and all these other things that are really huge challenges. And so that's the kind of thing that we want to really document. And then you can take that paper to your doctor and say, see, this is an issue in SCN8A. Get me these services. I need to try some medication. You need to help me because it's here. And Tammy, I will paste it there later. And thank you, Mary. We love having you with us, and we hope Billy's doing well. So, I think we're just really excited that this is really setting us on a path to say, what do we need to know about SCN8A? And how do we do that as a global community? And I think many of you may have seen that there's a meeting in Denmark that SCN8A Europe is putting on with SCN2A. They did one last year. They're doing it again this year. And we will be there presenting and engaging and meeting with all of these global leaders to start thinking about how we do this together, because we all know that the more we can work together, the faster we will get there. And that is our bottom line, is how do we fix as many things as we can for our kids as quickly as possible. So join us in that mission any way you can. Join a meeting, volunteer. We need lots of help. So if you have any kind of skills you want to put forward, just reach out and let's have a conversation, because we could probably use your help somehow. And we're trying to get better about that. So if you've talked to us in the past, come back, we'll figure something out. If you are someone who knows how to fundraise, you can do a Facebook fundraiser, you can do a birthday fundraiser, you can talk with us and we'll help you think about how to run an event or do something. This is going to take a lot of money to start really unraveling, the mysteries of SCN8A. We really appreciate this community who's come together to help find answers. It's really up to us to continue to share our information and talk to each other and find new ideas and paths. And Matt has very friendly reminded me that we have a meeting this weekend, which people can come and join Saturday. It's the severely impacted meeting. But like we said, if you want to join, if you want to be in community with people, just show up. You'll learn something. You can still talk and share your experiences. And even if it's, you're not struggling with the severe end of the spectrum, your perspective still helps add to the, to what we're learning. So anything else anybody else wants to say before we wrap up and just close things out for today?
Never be afraid to email us and tell us what you'd like to see more of from us. If you want more graphics on something specific, if you want, we're always here, either through the Alliance or scn8a.info.net. We're here for you. So just let us know.
Yeah. And we posted in the group about what do you want to hear most about, like what kind of issues. And from that, we're going to be starting to develop graphics from the registry. We're going to integrate those questions into the Zoom meetings that we have. So just continue to share what's of most importance to you, what you're interested in, what you want to learn more about. And we'll keep answering. That's our job. That's what we're here for. Thank you, Tammy. We love you and appreciate everything you do too. So We hope you all have an amazing SCN8A Awareness Day. Thank you for sharing our posts, for posting your pictures and your stories and your children. When you tag us, we'll try to engage and share if we can, and continue to push out more about SCN8A any way we can. So we love you all. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.